Okay, everybody, welcome to our last TPE webinar for this TPE season. My name is Nick Bates. I currently work as an assistant director for Thurman Center Networks and the Howard Thurman Center for Common Ground at Boston University. Today, we have our last series for myself and Christian as co-chairs of the Candidate Development Working Group. We have our last webinar on behalf of TPE for this season. Maybe we'll be back in the future. And so we're happy to be here with you all. And we thought it was extremely fitting to tackle the topic of applying for a job in student affairs or higher education without actually having a master's degree in higher education and student affairs. And we also thought it important to talk about how you navigate that space as you navigate your employment. And so today with us, we have Michaela Mobley, who is currently the assistant director at the Women's Center at Harvard University, or are you all college? The Harvard University, or is it college?
So it's a long title. Harvard Assistant Director of the Harvard College Women's Center, or the Harvard College Women's Center at Harvard University. It doesn't fit on my name badge.
So we have a wonderful esteemed guest, the assistant director for the Harvard College Women's Center at Harvard University. She will give a little bit of presentation about her experience, and then we'll have time for Q&A and some dialogue at the end. I want to let you all know that this session is currently being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. If you are one of those camera shy folks and don't want to be in the video, all of those good things, just make sure you keep your camera off and you won't pop up on the video. With that being said, of course, as always, please feel free to use the chat for dialogue, for encouragement, and all of those other great things as well. Without any further ado, I turn it over to you, Michaela, to do your thing as best as you can.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Nick and Christian for having me. I'm very happy to be here. When Nick asked me to talk about this journey that I've been on for the past 7 or 8 years, time is a man-made concept. So I don't always remember, but I haven't done much. I hadn't done much reflection on how I've been able to get to where I'm at today, um, without having the master's degree in higher ed or student affairs. And so doing this presentation or coming up with some of these slides or just thinking about my journey has been really really beneficial for me. So I'm hoping that it will be beneficial for the folks who are here today. So in Zoom language, I'm about to share my screen. So as Nick said, hello, my name is Michaela. Feel free to call me Mickey. My pronouns are she, they, and I currently serve as the assistant director of the Harvard College Women's Center at Harvard University. So let me tell you, so this is a lovely picture of me, my mother, and my sisters. I graduated from Mount St. Mary's University with a bachelor's in psychology and a double minor in sociology and philosophy. So since about high school, I knew that I was going to become a therapist. I was very adamant about that. It took a lot of convincing of my of my Caribbean parents to have them like support me in becoming a therapist, because in their minds psychology wasn't a real thing. They wanted me to be a lawyer, and they said that my dad literally said that therapists were quacks. And so to have to convince them as to why psychology was my passion, why mental health was my passion, and why it's actually a very real thing. And in turn, they became very supportive of my journey into becoming a psychologist. So at the end of graduating from the Mount, or at my time at the Mount, I had a mentor, a woman that became my mentor, who was she was the director of the Center for Student Diversity, which, as a Black person at a predominantly white institution, I spent a lot of my time in our multicultural office. And so she was very supportive in helping me apply to grad school, when my own academic counselor was not that, my own academic advisor was not that supportive of me getting into grad school. She told me about the grad programs at Loyola. It was actually a program that she had done herself when she got her master's, and she was like, "This will be the perfect place for you." And I still have connects that I know how to get you a job while you're in grad school. And I was like, "Great," because I can't really afford to take out any more loans. So fast forward to my first year as a grad student in the Masters of Clinical Psychology program at Loyola University, Maryland. I was the graduate assistant in the Women's Center. And it was an absolutely great experience. This was my first time working in student affairs for higher education. And to be honest, even in my first year there, I still didn't really think of it as a career path. I didn't know that it was a viable career path. I just thought this was what grad students do. Grad students in a grad program at a university are supposed to give their labor somehow, or because you have to you have to pay rent, you have to do all these things. So I was like, okay, so this is a job and I'll do this job. And in the vein of being a Caribbean person, of having multiple jobs, I also worked at the mall and I also worked as a dance teacher at another university. So I was doing a lot because I thought this is just what it was like. So being a grad assistant, being the GA at the Women's Center was just something that I did because it was something that paid me and I had to survive in grad school. So my second year, I became a graduate resident coordinator. Actually, Nick was my supervisor my second year at grad school, but my first year as being a GRC. And the only reason why I took this job was because my first year of grad school, I was commuting into school. I was living with my parents, and I love my parents, but I could not live with them anymore. Had to be done. And so my mentor from undergrad, she told me, it's like, well, why don't you look into residential life? They usually provide you with a on-campus apartment with a meal plan. It still gives you tuition remission like your position at the Women's Center. And I was like, okay. So I talked to my supervisor at that time at the Women's Center, and I asked her, it's like, do you know anything about this? Like, how can I make this work? And I was like, although I'm sad to leave, I can't keep messing up my tires with these Baltimore potholes, and I got to get out of my parents' house. And so she introduced me to I believe he was the associate director of student life at that time. And he came to some of the programs that I was putting on through the Women's Center, and liked my style of programming and event planning and execution, and connected me with one of the directors, the assistant directors of residential offices. And so I was encouraged to apply. I interviewed, I did all that, and then I was offered a job. So that summer, I think it was July of 2015. I started my first time training as a graduate resident coordinator. And I would still say at this time, like my goal was to always become a psychologist. And what is interesting about the makeup of the GRCs at Loyola at that time is that we were pretty much all in either the psychology master's program or the psychology doctor's program. And so we get to use a lot of our clinical and counseling skills on our students while we're practicing. And so I thought this was a job that definitely aligned with what my skills were and the skills that I would need to grow into so that I could become a proper clinician. So I'm still all about becoming a clinician at this time. So now it is now May of 2017. I have graduated. And because I actually finished my program in December of 2016, and I was just waiting to hear back from the PhD programs that I applied to. All the PhD programs I applied to were in counseling psychology. And the spring came around, and your girl did not get into a single program. I applied to 5 different PhD programs and did not get into a single one. So now it was time to redirect. And that was first, it was really hard because, from about the age of 15, 16, I knew that I wanted to become a clinician. And the fact that I did not get into a PhD program, the fact that I felt like I had wasted my time in my master's program, only because I didn't want to be a master's level clinician because, like I said, your girl has student loans that she had to pay back. So I took some time in between December, finished my program in December and graduating in May to think about what it is that I wanted to do. And it was one of those afternoons that I was sitting in Nick's office complaining about life and how higher education has been really unfair to me, or that I didn't want to, that I didn't know what to do anymore because I was like, I followed the formula and I didn't get into a program. Um, he asked me if I knew that if I could do this work, like I could do this work full time, I could have the job that he does. And I was like, I didn't know that. Like, what does one even start? Like, how do you do this? And then would I have to go back to school because I did not want to go back to school to get another master's? And he was like, he told me that that this field is a combination of that includes psychology. And I was like, so okay, so there's some, he was telling me, it's like, this theory in psychology is called this theory in student affairs. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to be useful here. And the fact that I've been doing this work, and just doing, I'm the type of person that if I'm going to do a job, I'm going to do it well. So the fact that I was doing my job well and that people were noticing that, and that I was making those connections between my supervisors, previous supervisors, and keeping up those relations. Also, connecting with people from across the office, across the campus, it felt like this was like that this could become a viable option for me, even though I did not have that degree. So after December finished and I needed to find a job because in my parents' house, you don't live here if you don't work. And so I was working at a temp agency, just taking those odd jobs every few weeks to make sure that I had that I could support myself and contribute to my household. And I reached out to my mentor and just doing a kind of general check-in. And she asked me, had I found a permanent position yet? And I said no. And this was about February or so. And she said, I have, she was like, someone that you went on a volunteer trip with that while you were in undergrad is now working at the University of Notre Dame in Maryland. And they know open position in another office, in the Res Life office. And would you be interested in going back in? And let me tell you, my experience as a working in residential life at Loyola was tough. I did not like it, but I needed to do it because I needed a job. It provided me housing, and it was something that I felt like I just had to get through. But it wouldn't have been my first choice, and I was like, I don't know, man, I don't know if I'm ready to do that again. Like, I really need a break. But I was like, once again, I need to get out of my parents' house. I love them, but I don't want to live with them anymore. So I was like, okay, so let me get the information. So she connected me with the old service trip leader. He spoke to me just to kind of do a little catch up, and then he was like, let me pass you on to the dean so that you can have that interview with her. So I left my temp job early, shot over to Baltimore City to go to the campus, and had a like a interview. And on the spot she was like, okay, so she's like, we need you and you need a job, so when can you move back to the city? And I was like, literally today. I can start moving my things in today if you have a room for me. And so that position was actually a position that I had no business being in. I was their interim director for housing and residential life. So I went from being a grad student, a graduate resident coordinator, to a director of residential life. But I would also say that because their population is very small, they only have a population of about 600 students. It's a very small women's college. Um, I lived in a building when I was working at Loyola of a building of about 800 students. So I felt like I was like, this is something that I know that I can do. Like, I can manage this. I can manage. I had 2 GAs under me, and I had a staff of 10 community assistants. It's like, I can do this. I know that I could. And it took a lot of I relied heavily on my network of really of my community, of my mentor, of Nick. Like, these are people who have really helped me in this field. And so that position was also incredibly toxic, as it sometimes happens when you have quick turnovers like that. And after my temporary contract was up, or before my temporary contract was up, I started job searching again. And it was really hard trying to get interviews for anything outside of, for anything outside of residential life, because that's where my experience was. Um, but I just kept at it and I kept applying for jobs. And eventually I did accept another job in residential life at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And it was very interesting in being able to talk about my experience as a clinician, as someone who used to work in community health, and at the same time as somebody who had some experience, some paraprofessional experience working in higher education. And I really had to craft my resume, my cover letter in ways, in talking about how, what my true passion is. And my passion is helping people. My passion is helping others. And so at the end of the day, that is what our field is about, is that, something that I joke around with colleagues and students is like, my job as a student affairs professional is to help turn you young adults into people. So we're teaching you skills, we're helping you, we're holding space for you in order for you to learn and to fall and to make mistakes and also to grow. And I'm part of that growth. And so after working at, while working at UNLV and knowing that residential life is not where I wanted to stay, I had to start formulating plans as to how am I going to get out of residential life and get into my passion, which is doing justice work and advocacy and policy work. And so I had to create opportunities for myself. I had to, any conference that came up, whether it was local or regional or national, I made sure that I was like one of those people who were going. I made it very clear to my supervisor, like, this is where I want to be and how are you going to help me get there? And when I saw that there was a need for something such as comprehensive justice training, a part of our residential life experience, both for our professionals and for our students, I created that. You know, it was I had to find a way to redirect, um, and not having that master's of higher ed or student affairs stop me, because I knew that I was passionate about the work that I was doing with my students, and I know that I had the skills to do it because I had the skills as a clinician, as a therapist. And what is our work? How many times have had students come in to us or just come to us just to talk, and that they want to be heard, and we are holding that space for them. So a little bit of some takeaways, um, some advice while you are on your journey, while you're applying. Whatever degree you may have, it is useful. I'm telling you, you do not need to get a second master's. You do not need to get a certificate in higher ed or anything like that. And I would say that not having the degree in higher ed or student affairs has been my superpower, because I think differently. I see things from a different perspective. And I have people in our field who are coming to me asking me for my opinion or asking me for my expertise, consulting with me of how can we do things differently. Because we don't need everyone in our field to have that same perspective. We're never going to grow. We're never going to really be a place of true growth and learning, and in a place where all people of all identities and abilities can thrive if we all have the same viewpoint. Um, Finding a mentor has been absolutely crucial. Um, and you don't have to do it I would say, thankfully, I've had mentors in a very organic way, where my mentor from undergrad, she sought me out because she realized I was one of those students who didn't do anything my first semester. I was very reclusive. I stayed in my room, and she was like, why aren't you connected to people? Let's connect to people. And then from that, we just became, that's my homie. Like, I still call her up. I was on I did a presentation with her just a few weeks ago. And Nick had been someone where we just connected. As my supervisor, he took an interest in me, and I wasn't afraid to ask him, questions, and he would tell you that I asked him very hard questions about this field and why why should I stay in it and why should I give my energy to it. um, you have to use what you have to get where you want. So like I said, my experience came in residential life mostly, and I don't want to do that work. That is not work that is fulfilling to me. That is work that actually drains me. And my hats off to all my people in the trenches that do res life. Um, and so what I knew where I wanted to be was in the multicultural, the social justice office spaces, and I knew that I had the ability to do that by that I do my own personal research, and that I'm always talking with people, and that I know how to craft trainings. And so being in residential spaces and asking like how can I, social justice work should not just happen in social justice offices. So here's what I can offer to you. And I was doing social justice work as a residential life coordinator. I was invited to teach classes while I was at UNLV and now here at Harvard, because I'm making those, I'm telling people like this is what I know how to do, and this is where I see your lack, and so how can I help you with the things that I can do. I would also say like currently my next step for me, where I would like to go in my field, in my journey, is to become a professor. Is to become a professor of race and gender studies. And so, I was lucky enough to be able to get a meeting with our the head of our department of the Women and Gender Studies department at Harvard. And I said, I see that you're lacking Black feminist studies and queer feminist studies. And this is work that I do, and I've actually created courses for this. And here you go. And it's not very popular for people on the student affairs side to teach at Harvard. They actually like discourage it. But I was just gonna let them know that I know what you're missing, and what you're missing is me. And so you might want to snatch me up. Um, I know in our field is very important. Like when we go to these conferences, that people are always saying like network and bring your cards. But I don't believe in networking. Like you have to foster genuine relationships in our field, because it is small and someone always knows someone else. And so when you're your genuine self, and when you're trying to connect with people, not because of what they can do for you, but because they too are a person. This is how we move away from networking and moving towards community care. And so I would not be where I'm at without my community. Like I have a tribe behind me, no, not just behind me, that I am entrenched in, um, of people who genuinely care about me and making sure that I am happy, both like mentally, emotionally, and both as like in my career. And I do the same thing for them. So some of my GAs who have come up after me, or the people who I've supervised, we're still close, we're still friends, and they can reach out to me just as I know that I can reach out to someone above me. So it's really about fostering those general relationships. Networking is not enough. It's not enough to just collect people's business cards. You got to get to know people, and then create opportunities for yourself. So when you are doing your cover letter, or when you are doing your resume, or even if you got just that first, you make it to the first round of interviews, you know, you can let them know what it is that you have to offer, just as much as they're trying to get you to see what you trying to get you there. You can tell them like, this is why you want me here, because I have a lot to offer to myself. I have a different perspective. I have a difference in experience. I have a passion for this work. And that is in when I get to your school, when I get to your institution, just know that I'm gonna make it do what it do. Like you're going to get a lot out of me, as well as you need to be getting a lot out of them. So that is the end of my spiel. I would love to be able to answer any questions for you all, both here and afterwards if you don't feel comfortable in speaking or sending things in the chat. So you can find me at my website, which is getinthemix.com, and or you can email me at mobley@fas.harvard.edu. So thank you all.
I have a question for you and thank you for sharing all of those great narratives. For you, how did you approach navigating the culture of student affairs that you weren't immersed in, right? As someone who did not have a student affairs master's, there are people who just randomly, will talk about, I don't know, Schlossberg's theory of moral development or something like that. They will randomly bring up these type of things, right? How did you acquiesce or learn to navigate those spaces?
So I'm the type of person, I will look something up. Like if someone says something that I don't understand, if somebody says a word that I don't understand, baby, I have a diction, like a whole world in my phone, in my pocket. So I will take out my phone and I will look something up. I'm also not afraid to ask questions. So if someone says something that I don't understand, um, I will ask them. So I would say this is, let me back it up. I would say I have a process of how I continue to still navigate higher ed. Because I would also say that each school that I've worked at has been incredibly different. I've worked at small, private, liberal arts Catholic schools. I've worked at very large public institutions. And now working at the oldest institution in our country. And that is a bear in itself. And so I have, my first step is that I have to I listen more than I speak. So I can't I want to see how people operate and then see how I may be able to find my groove in that. And so once I see how I look and I watch how people operate in any given space, who's the people who are talking, who is the people who are, sitting back, what are their titles, and seeing how who is speaking and who's taking up airspace, who's allowed to talk, what ideas are shot down, what ideas are amplified, um, and then that's when I start asking questions. And I would say that it's taken me a very long time to figure out how to ask questions in a way that I can get the answer that I need. Because sometimes folks get really, some people they love their process so much. And when you have a fresh set of eyes of things, you can see like, well, your process could be harmful to the students, or your process could be inefficient. And people don't want to hear that about their process that they love so much. So it's about asking questions in a manner that is not going to offend people, although you cannot control people's reactions, you can only control yourself, but, or not, but, and I'm still going to try to do my best I need to still get the answer that I want. That's what it means to be an effective communicator, is that the person has to understand you and they want to have to answer you back. um, and then between listening and watching, and then from that, making those types of questions, that is how I've been able to navigate. Um, I would also say, so like I said, you don't need a certificate or a second master's in higher education or student affairs. Um, what I do is that I just read the literature. I follow things on Twitter and Instagram, the Chronicles of Higher Ed, Inside Higher Ed. Um, Anytime somebody mentions an author or a book, I make a note of it and I put it in my library. So, we should always be doing the work in our field. No matter what, I would say, no matter what field, you never stop learning. You just don't got to pay for it. You don't got to pay a tuition. So you should always be looking things up. And, there's a lot of free information out there as well. And it's just about taking advantage of it.
Thank you for that. Other questions from our audience, whether you want to add anything to the chat, or ask a question in general. If not, I'll keep asking questions.
I wrote this in the chat, and I'm just very thankful that you talked about the importance of moving away from networking and fostering true relationships. And the reason I say that is because I think sometimes what happens is when we think of networking, we think of it being very transactional, right? That I'm going to meet you and I'm going to reach out to you because one day down the road, I'm going to need something from you. Or I'm applying for a job and I need you to give me the 411 about everything that's happening. And while I guess in some sense that could be beneficial for folks, right? If someone was able to give you a glimpse of what's happening at real moment, your aim should be always going beyond that, right? In terms of mentorship, in terms of guidance, in terms of just human connection. And so I want to say thank you for sharing that. And then two, any advice you have for folks who may be apprehensive to foster genuine relationships to that degree?
Yeah. So thank you. I received that. Thank you. Um, and I would say for folks, for some folks who are apprehensive or shy, whatever it may be, whatever adjective you just choose to describe yourself, I would say don't let this like outgoing, bubbly personality fool you. I'm very much an introvert, and like after I finish this, I'm going to go lay in bed and like wrapped up in a blanket. This is too much for me. But I would say that it you only need to do one person at a time. So like for example, I had one person that reached out to me, and then that person had a larger network that connected me. Um and even something as like when I go to conferences, I'm not the kind of person at a conference that is talking to like I'm not a social butterfly. I'm not going around the room. What I am doing is like there's sometimes we'll do like workshops and we're talking to a few people in a group, and then I'm just talking to my group, and then usually there's one person out of that group that I would then make a connection with, because I'm just being myself. And then after, then we just keep up with one another. So I don't think that you have, to me it's not a numbers game. It's definitely about that quality. um to share like a small little anecdote, I one of my former classmates introduced me to, I was like, when I wanted to move back to the East Coast where my family is from Nevada, I was like, bro, like I just need to get something out there. So my I was talking to one of my old classmates, and I was just like complaining about how I needed to get out of Nevada. And she introduced me, she's like, do you remember this so and so from our program? And I was like, sure don't. And she connected us, and we just spoke a little bit, and I was like, no, like I'm sorry that I don't remember you from the program, but we just spoke, and that person works at American. And they were like, I know of a job opening up at, oh, no, I'm sorry, not American, at Georgetown. There's like, I know a job that's opening up at Georgetown. Um, that you would be perfect for. And then that person then connected me. And so it's really about making that one-to-one genuine connection. Um, I think I would say also, especially if you hold multiple marginalized or just a single any marginalized identity, um, I'm very happy that I've attracted those people who care about my mental health, and how care about my experience at different institutions. And so, when you're building those connections, you usually then, or when you're fostering that one connection with that person, there's usually another person that they're going to connect you with. So it is very, when you're a little bit shy or a little bit apprehensive of trying to cast a far net, I would say, honor that. You don't have to cast a wide net of your network. You want to have a community of people, and that can be starting off with just one person.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I get so my question for you too. I guess it's my last question for you. How do you um, how do you navigate shifting your own expectations of what working looks like, as you sort of pivot from a different career path as you articulated? And I know this as well, but you really had this passion for going into a doctoral program. And so you notice that you need to make a shift, and your shift just so happens to be to higher ed. How do you navigate sort of shifting your own approach to a different industry?
Hmm. I think what my mindset has always been is that I can live many lifetimes within this one lifetime. And so it's okay if like redirection is going to happen regardless, and that is okay. um I think how I've been navigating that is, in very much a similar way of what I do currently, is that I have to watch, and I need to listen, I need to learn first, um and then it's about making connections with the right people, or people who, and the right people simply means the people um who are willing and able to share knowledge with me, the people who are willing and able to be in community with me. And so as I'm thinking of moving from student affairs over to the academic side, um, it is simply, I don't, Lord, how have you done it, Nikki? Because you're doing it. Finding where common interests lie. So, for example, when I was saying that I talked to the Women and Gender Studies department head, and you know, it was simply just me taking a look into their curriculum and noticing that you don't have any Black queer women faculty in your department, and that you also teach nothing on any type of Black and diasporic feminism, and nothing and not enough on Black queer theories. And I'm letting you know that this is something that I can do. And so what I did was I was like, do you want to go for tea? Because this is the person that I need to talk to. And if the person is not receptive, they're not receptive. Like, I'm not going to force it. Um, but it's simply the way that I've decided that I have to navigate it is that I have to do it being my most authentic self. And especially when the question around like, how do I see like my expectations of work shifting? I cannot do work that is not in alignment with me. And I will say that that has been a struggle as I get higher up in student affairs, because there's a lot of parts of you, to be quite plain, that you have to kill. You have to kill a lot of parts of you. A lot of you have to rethink a lot of your morals and your values in order to keep rising to the top. And that's not work that I can always do in alignment. Like, that's not in something that's in alignment with who I am as a person. And so as looking as like, what do I want to do? How do I want to work? Because we have to do it, unfortunately, until we know are no longer participants in a capitalistic society, we have to work. So how can I do work in a way that, at the very minimum, the foundation does not cause me to have to kill parts of myself that I hold dearly? And then if I'm not allowed to do work in that way, then I simply won't do it. And so as I'm starting to switch, and I have now realized that I have to keep saying, and a part of that is me saying no to a lot of things and being okay with that. But then as I'm switching to a different side of our field, knowing that I may not get the what is it that I want to do? Is it do you want to be a tenured professor, or are you more concerned about teaching and challenging and holding space for students? And teaching them how to have those skills as they move forward. And I can do that without having tenure. I can do that without killing parts of myself. So yeah, sorry to get a
That's
little woo woo.
I mean, this honestly is very true. I always say at a certain point, you have to keep reevaluating what type of professional you want to be
Definitely.
as you enter new seasons, new positions, just new phases of your own life. There are things that 5 years ago that I would do that I just wouldn't do today. Five years later. There are things a year ago, honestly, or shall we say, 14, 15 months ago that I would do that I wouldn't do today because I'm different. And I think that's true for all of us as we engage the field, or as we navigate the field on our journeys. Got a question. What do you think are the most important skills needed in a professional higher education position, specifically for those working with young adults?
A lot of it is what it is going to be people skills. You need to learn how to listen. We need to be able to listen to our students. If we're not doing student-centered work, then there's no need for us to be in this field. So that means really having to listen to students. And then do what they say. Take the expertise that you have and balance it with what students are asking for. I would also say that there's a great deal of bravery here that is needed in this work. I'm sure you all were probably asking this like in terms of like what kind of more grounded skills that you needed, but it's a lot of what our work is people work. And so if you don't know how to work with people, then you cannot work in this field. So I'm sorry that these like skills are a little bit abstract, but it truly is like listening. You need to listen and you need to be brave, because as our field is changing, it is changing rapidly, and the way the directions in which it is going is definitely, it's like in direct antithesis of the work that what I'm telling you to do. It is not telling you to listen to students. It is not telling you to be brave and to challenge systems that are harming our students, that are harming your fellow colleagues. Like what I'm telling you is complete opposite, but it's what's going to be important, not to be able to advance in this career, but to be able to do with the work that actually needs to be done, what we are truly needing to do in our in this field.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you're talking about sort of the that comparative, that example we hear about, like hard skills and soft skills, right? And the people work is what people consider the soft skills, but it is I guess what I take from your comments is grace. Learning to have a level of grace, especially working with students who have multiple competing priorities, and at times they don't realize that this is like work for us. This is what we do. They forget sometimes.
They sure do.
Any other questions before we close? Christian, you get any questions directly to you?
No, I did not get any questions directly to me at this time.
All right. Any other? Lauren, go ahead.
Hello, hi. So my name is Lauren Hammer. I use she, her pronouns. Thank you for sharing. And I really appreciate your honesty and your like forthcomingness with like the good and the bad. And I think that's so refreshing to hear and like super helpful for like young professionals in the field to also hear. I think to kind of bounce back to your point from earlier about doing that like self-reflection. And so going through that period of this is what I thought I wanted to do, and maybe that's not it anymore. Maybe this is what I want to do. And thinking about like Nick's point on there are things I would do 5 years ago that I won't do now, or vice versa. What are some, if there are any, key questions or reflective points that you have with yourself that help you really think through, well, what do I want? What am I willing to compromise? What am I not willing to compromise? What are those kind of key things that you do to like work within yourself to get where you want to be?
Okay. Thank you so much, Lauren, for that question. I think you've named some of those questions, like, what it is, what am I willing to compromise and what am I not willing to compromise? I would say my word for that, though, is more of like, what is an alignment? Like, what is an alignment for me? What feels good? And this is also knowing that not every day we are going to feel good. I'm of the thinking, though, we spend more time at our places of employment than we do with our own loved ones. So if there's not any sense of happiness, if there's not any sense of joy, if there's not every sense of fulfillment that I can grab from my work, even if it's just one thing, I cannot work there. I cannot be there. And so asking is like, what is an alignment? Does this feel good to me? I would also say, hold on, the thought left my mind. Give me a second, Monday brain. And then is what I'm doing causing, or what will I be, what it is, blah, blah, blah. Is what I'm doing causing harm? Because there's nothing, I cannot do something which is going to cause harm to the very people that I'm trying to serve. So is it causing harm? And then and then to go deeper, what is the impact? Is it a positive impact? Is it changing something? Is it challenging a system? Is it going to make things a little bit better for the people that I'm serving and for me? I think also as student affairs professionals, we sometimes become martyrs for our students, and we can't do the work like that. So if we're not in a place in which we are, that is also good for us, that is also having a positive impact for us, then we can never do that. We can never create those spaces for our students. So is it an alignment? What am I willing to compromise? I think has been one of the biggest questions as I in my most recent years, as I moved from my one institution to my current one right before the pandemic started. Because like I said earlier, there's parts of us that we have to kill in order to exist. When we live in a world full of isms, there's always going to be something for us to have. There's always going to be a part of us that we have to kill in order to participate. What are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do? in order to make sure that you feel good at the end of each day.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for sharing that. Other questions before we close? Anyone else? All right. I'm going to thank you again to Mickey for joining us and sharing their experience on what it's like navigating higher ed without the student affairs masters. This is our last series for the placement exchange for this year. So thank you to everybody who's joined us at some point, whether it's via TPE virtual or any of our other virtual offerings, or if you're a part of our Backpack Institute as well. Thank you for joining us. If you are interested in previous content that we've done, you can feel free to go to the Placement Exchange's YouTube channel. Other than that, I hope you're signed up for our newsletter and still getting our regular updates. If you're not, you can do that on the TPE website as well. And also, if you're interested in being a member of the Placement Exchange Committee, the application is actually out on our website as well. And so feel free to join for the TPE 2022. Feel free to join and apply if you're interested in joining the committee. With that being said, I'm going to log off. Hopefully you already have our contact. If not, it's easy to find. With that being said, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for being in this space with us. And thank you to Mickey again for joining us and imparting such great wisdom. With that being said, everybody have a beautiful Monday. I hope it is nice weather where you all are. If not, I hope you dream about nice weather like I do when it's not nice weather. Signing off and see you all later.